what we are seeing in the collective, all of the unraveling and the deconstruction with systems and institutions and ideologies and all of that, it is reflective of what's happening inside each of us all. And so we are being asked to look at our wounding and to look at the ways in which we judge and divide and separate on one another. But because we separate on ourselves, why do we do that? Possibly, at least this is what I'm exploring, the unresolved trauma that lies dormant within my nervous system that is longing for love and acceptance and to be allowed to exist, but not just because I say it as a mental construct, but because I go in and actually nourish myself deep within. And so that is the practice that I am on, along with, yes, simultaneously being fully aware that I am held by God, that I am one with the divine, that there are magic and miracles and love and light everywhere present, that it truly is a heaven on earth reality. And at the same time, the mirror is out and we are being asked in these cosmic times, these evolutionary shifts in consciousness, to turn inward and to do the deep inner work. And when we do, we make an impact for the collective. Well, hey there, and welcome back to Fire and Soul. And I am celebrating so much deep gratitude in my heart because it is our 7-year anniversary. So if you've been around the show for a long time, I want to say thank you. Thank you for listening, for continuing to tune in and possibly share with friends. And it is not lost on me that there are so many other shows and that you continue to come back and that we're growing. We've doubled in downloads in the past couple months. And for that, I am so grateful that there is an energetic, a frequency that is magnetizing those who need what's being shared in this most magical little portal. You know, I've been running the show since June 11th, 2018. And back then, when we released my very first episode, I was certain we'd made a huge mistake. We being my producer at the time, turned dear friend, and then business partner for a while in the podcast accelerator, Ms. Ginny Saraswati. I told her we'd made a huge mistake. Take it down, take it down. And of course, she did not let us take it down. But then I realized, like the next day, what was really driving that was deep anxiety that it wasn't good enough, right? Of course, when we try on new things, and even if they're old things, sometimes that will creep up and run us unconsciously or consciously. But what I recognized at that time that I shared with a lot of people that I think was useful is that I was comparing my very, very beginning to, at the time I was such a big fan, to Oprah's middle. You know, I wanted to interview the way Oprah does, which didn't feel like an interview. It felt more of like a conversation, and she'd ask the things that really no one else does, but she knows that people are thinking. And I have to say, I believe that I do that. And I don't think I'm nearly as polished as Oprah, but I also think that's part of who I am, you know, and I'm not looking to be all polished and have it perfectly produced. By any means. And I'm grateful to have that awareness all these years later. And so anyway, just taking a moment to honor how far we've come, all of us, you know. My goodness, in 7 years, what a journey. When I think back to 2018, I mean, I was so deep in the Tony Robbins world and rocking those rooms and just, man, opening and awakening with just such clarity and passion and enthusiasm and fire. And when the podcast started, it was the mindset mashup. And then about a year later, it was very clear that it needed to be fire and soul. And fire and soul at that time, that still remains so true for me today in terms of title and intention of mission, is inspired action from an awakening soul. Only now I might call it more aligned action from an awakening soul. But it's pretty much the same. And what a gift to look back with the benefit of hindsight and see how that nudge that dropped in to change the name of a show has really carried us forward. And then I think about all the guests that have come on Fire and Soul, you know, gosh, we're well north of 280 episodes. And some of these people that I have always been inspired by and moved by and opened and awakened by, that I wouldn't have otherwise that kind of access to, right? I mean, it's one thing to meet over a meal or amongst friends or at an event, But it's a whole other thing when you get a chance to connect like this, just one on one, heart to heart, no distractions, undivided attention. What an absolute blessing with anyone, much less some of these people that I know are so incredibly full in their schedules, and that I get those yeses, and that deepens me, deepens you into yeah, a more expanded state of awareness, self, others, and the collective as a whole. So I really am present lately to just how profound this portal of fire and soul really is, and what it's really given me and what it's given you. And I am deeply moved by this journey, and I am so grateful that the times that I knew we needed to pause, that I actually also honored those nudges of like, okay, bring it back. So whether it's, you know, whatever happens to the numbers, right? When we're in like this much larger wave or a smaller wave, like just really appreciating whatever wave we are riding together. It's been a journey, and I am so, so grateful for you. So thank you. Yeah. So today, my goodness, I just want to share what's alive in my heart. Not for this to be any sort of guidance. I'm just kind of sharing and riffing with the divine, and maybe it'll be useful for you. I was thinking about the last time I kind of came on and offered up a solo, and it's been quite a while. And I'll share a little bit why I don't really do that as much right now. And it's because I feel like we all know anyway. We're all going through so many initiations. We're all feeling the intensity in the collective. These cosmic times are no joke, as my dear friend Bonnie Peace will say. These cosmic times are no joke, and it's very, very true, right? And then now, as I record in the midst of another window of some intense solar flares here in early June, I'm feeling it. And I happen to be on a little bit of an upswing right now, thankfully. It is what it is, but like of just coming out of a really deep, dark, dark, dark night of the soul that yeah, it was one of the bigger ones. And I am really, really grateful for it. You know, and what I'm recognizing is that, gosh, there's been 5 different conversations that I've had with other women who are really embodied in their spiritual leadership, in their divine knowing, in their dharma. They are doing the shadow work. They are, I think, really self-aware on a lot of levels. They understand trauma and somatics. They're doing the work on all the levels, yeah. And all 5 of these conversations in the last like maybe 10 days have had a very, very similar theme. And that is, these times are no joke. The mirror is out. And what everyone is in agreement on, and especially me, and maybe this will be for you too, is that we're being taken back to some ancient, unhealed wounds, whether that is in the womb, early childhood, adolescent years, all the above, or beyond even the remembrance of this lifetime. And so that is not easy. And that can be deeply confrontational. And we can carry grief and shame and rage and and all the feels, right? And then hopefully begin to connect the dots depending on how deep our own inner work practice is, or who we are working with, or the kinds of trainings that we are in. Like, for example, I haven't shared this yet, but I am about midway through formal training to become a trauma-informed practitioner. So through Trauma and Somatics, it's a beautiful organization that has helped to certify almost 500 people like me, whether they're clinical psychologists or wellness coaches or psychotherapists. I mean, the range is vast, and it's those of us recognizing that we've got to regulate ourselves so that we have a deeper, wider, more accurate perspective and capacity to also serve others, but also recognizing because everyone's carrying so much right now and it's being amplified and intensified at a maximum level. And I don't see it changing anytime soon until or if we are courageous enough to go in and be with it, right? And so as I'm in that training, I'm also learning that where my observations will like pause and then where I would encourage those that I might be working with, know or love, to then seek out additional support where my work would end from my current capacity in my training. And so this work is very humbling. It's been wild to revisit some of the parts that have lived in me since I was just a very, very, very little girl. And I'm sure at some point I'll go into a lot of detail about that. But what I can say is that 90% of us, this is what I'm learning through trauma and somatics and beautiful research that they do as fully embodied mentors and teachers and guides, will, Natasha, Jeff, if you ever hear this, I hope that I honor you accurately, but and their research, but yeah, about 90% of us walking this planet at this time carry some sort of chronic PTSD. And about 40% of us have acute trauma, or there's different types of trauma. And so trauma, as defined by the training that I'm in, is anything that happened maybe too soon, too much, too little, too fast. And so our nervous systems, which are our living process and expressed through, you probably are familiar with like the four different types of modalities or ways in which to process, is like fight, flight, freeze, fawn. Fawn is a newer one, and fawn is typically like the pleaser, right? Just don't say anything, go along to get along, that kind of thing. So we all have our sort of favorite patterns of how we express when we get activated. And so becoming more present to what trauma is and its energy, any unresolved energy from an incident, from something that we experienced too soon, too fast, too little, too much, all those different iterations, right? That remains sort of stuck in our nervous system. And I would say is seeking resolution with the divine, because I believe it all goes back to the divine, which is who I know that I'm an emanation of. And so all of these patterns and energetic patterns and shadows and unhealed, wounded parts of me, they are looking for love. And then when I see how they might express under anxiety or stress or fear or doubt or worry, for me, I noticed that it was showing up with righteousness, control, subtle hierarchies, all the ways in which we do. And I imagine that some of you will relate to some of that. And for others, it might be more of like a closed down, feeling more repressed, isolated, don't speak out at all. And so that's just kind of like a very general, wide, loose range. But from everything that I can see is like, wow, when I start to really notice how that shows up for me, it'll begin as something that looks and feels a lot like hypervigilance, right? Who can I trust? How can I be right? What do I need to control? Where am I not safe? Who deserves my presence? Who doesn't? That kind of stuff, right? And so it's just this constant like, just like scanning for safety, 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 or control, control, control. That's been my experience. And so this has shown up also through some judgment, right? And I mentioned the subtle hierarchies or sometimes not so subtle hierarchies. And in many instances, it's not happening. And I'm just like in awe of how much I've grown and evolved. And then in other instances, it's like, oh, wow, I can see how that stubborn trauma directed some of those unconscious or sometimes conscious, but usually unconscious for us all, patterns of survival, you know? So my getting present to all of this is these energies are activating in so many of us. Some not present to it, some numbed out to it, but a lot of us like, what in the world is happening? I'm raging out of nowhere, or I'm in depression out of nowhere, or I can't dream. I can't even like, I can't even hope, just like feeling a little locked down. And I feel there's just this deep, deep trauma and PTSD, especially since 2020. And I think that there's not enough people talking about that. In fact, I don't really know anyone who's talking about it. There must be. But I thought, God, wouldn't it be great if there was like a 12-step program, but it's not a 12-step program, of a place where you could just go and share, like in your local hometown, your local community, and share your story of what it's been like to lose friends in the shuffling of community, and maybe losing jobs, or not being able to see life from that same shared lens of perception with someone that you love so dearly, but they just don't know you anymore, and you don't know them anymore, and the sort of gap and chasm is just getting wider and wider and wider, and you try to hold on, and it's just sometimes it feels unbearably painful because it's just no longer a frequency fit, you know. So Lee Harris talks about this a lot, about the frequency deselection, I think is his term, and how, some of these endings and completions and closures, they feel like such death and it's such heartbreak, but yet at the end of the day, with all death comes rebirth. And so how can we honor, those experiences while being accountable to what we know to be true, and with the words and benefit of Maya Angelou's beautiful quote of, when you know better, you do better. So apologizing from our hearts when we mean it, and when we know it, right? And we can start to get a sense, and also that discernment of like who gets to know full stories and who doesn't, right? Based on willingness and courage to have those conversations, and recognizing that at the end of the day, what all of us are carrying informs the way in which we communicate, and especially when it gets really, really hard and scary. And so, one of the things that I wanted to leave you with today is that healing, and we're all on this path of healing, it does not have to be hard, but I do think that it requires honesty. And so the more honest that we are with ourselves about our own life experience and all the ways in which we know to be true, then the more beautiful the invitation is to actually begin to come home to our own wholeness, our own healing, right? Our own belonging, sense of safety and dignity, from the words of some of the training that I'm in, that each of us must experience individually, and then, of course, offering that to someone that we know, that we love, that we guide, that we're in community with, and that, I believe, is the only way through this. My dad and I were on a Zoom this morning, and he was just telling me about his heartbreak and rage over what he's seen happening in Gaza and the Ukraine, and the massacre. And of course, my heart hurts so deeply, as well as I know yours does. And so we got to talk about that, and have this, this understanding of that it's so much bigger than anything we could ever even imagine. It's certainly not what we're being told on the TV, and it's certainly not coming from inside, a US administration, for example. And I'm really grateful that my dad can actually see that. Doesn't mean that it's gives him any more comfort or strength, but at least he knows that it's not a particular political party, right? Like, okay, scan out, it's some puppeteers for the whole world. And I'm just so grateful that my dad has that capacity in moments. But so to talk about his rage, it's just like, yeah, I'm experiencing that in my own flavors of suffering, right? And I said, Dad, that's what I think is happening, though. What we are seeing in the collective, all of the unraveling and the deconstruction with systems and institutions and ideologies and pedestals and all of that, it is reflective of what's happening inside each of us all. And so we are being asked to look at our wounding and to look at the ways in which we judge and divide and separate on one another. But because we separate on ourselves, why do we do that? Possibly, at least this is what I'm exploring, the unresolved trauma, that lies dormant within my nervous system that is longing for love and acceptance and to be allowed to exist, but not just because I say it as a mental construct, but because I go in and actually nourish myself deep within. And so that is the practice that I am on, along with, yes, simultaneously being fully aware that I am held by God, that I am one with the divine, that there are magic and miracles and love and light everywhere present, that it truly is a heaven on earth reality. And at the same time, the mirror is out and we are being asked in these cosmic times, these evolutionary shifts in consciousness, to turn inward and to do the deep inner work. And when we do, we make an impact for the collective. This is what I know to be true in my own experience and based on observation, and there is no escaping it in these times. We can keep trying, we can keep attempting, denying, avoiding, ignoring, wishing it would go away, and that will oftentimes push us more into our addictions. And so it will come for us as we are ready. And that's another thing that I have learned very humbly is that I am not here to try to get anyone to see anything before they are ready. And this was a really, really important teaching for me in these last many weeks. Who am I to say that someone is even supposed to learn it in that way? I know that this far into my deep inner work and healing journey, it's only this year, 2025, where some of the most suppressed parts of my experience are beginning to surface because my body now knows that I have the capacity to be with that depth of what is seeking resolution. Does that make sense? And so if it does, then you get this. This is like a yes, I get it. And it's not easy and it's a burn, but it is a true embodied phoenix rising. And so we learn to be more resilient. We learn to create our inner union and inner safety, therefore, our deep divine remembrance. And for that, I am just so incredibly grateful. Yeah. So wherever you are on your journey right now, perhaps you will want to just take a moment to close your eyes, take a normal breath, and just get present to what's happening on the inside. And maybe I'll just leave you with this somatic check-in. There's no like solution out of it, but you're just like getting present to what's happening on the inside. And it's, possibly with your eyes closed if you can, because you aren't driving and you are stationary. You would simply say, maybe to yourself silently, in my body, I'm noticing. And you're just looking for a sensation. Now I'm going to offer up some sensations, just sort of a range off the top of my head. If this distracts you, just put it on pause and just look for your own sensation if you're familiar with what that might be. But it could be warmth, radiance, darkness, tenseness, dense, edgy, billowy. That's kind of a nice range. In my body, I'm noticing sensation and I'm experiencing, and now you look for the emotion, not the story, not the meaning, just an emotion. So again, a range, but if you know emotions, then pause. Otherwise, some examples could be joy, grief, sad, mad, doubt, worry, overwhelm, anxiety, fear. And what I recently learned is feeling numb is an emotion. I was feeling so numb over those 3 weeks recently that I felt so disconnected from everything. And it's because I was breaking loose some really, really deep trauma and just heartbreak over some things that were happening. And it was really good medicine for me and continues to be. So now I can begin to feel again and sense the sensations as well as get present to the emotions. And when I can't, I can't. And that's okay too. So it's just learning to get present to what is happening on the inside. So there's like a moment of like, hi, body, I'm with you. Hello, nervous system. I feel you. Yeah, or I see you, or I'm here for you. and put the divine inner child in there, even better. And I'm sure there'll be more that I will expand on as I have it. But this has been really life-changing work for me, and I'm so grateful, grateful, grateful to my friend Ruby Fremont, actually, who I know that I'll be working with in a deeper capacity in the trauma and somatics work as my own guide. But she turned me on to Will Reason's Trauma and Somatics organization about 2 years ago when she first began studying. And yeah, I'll probably go deeper into this work because the work that I am doing with my private mentorship clients in my circles, groups, and on the women's retreats. I work only actually with women at this time, but I'm realizing that because so much of our work is up and activated and seeking resolution, seeking healing, I wanted to have a deeper capacity to attune to those that I am present with, whether it is a client or a loved one, family member or friend. There's little Leo. And so that feels important, but like I said, but also having the awareness of where my work would end and then pass off to someone who is more trained in the areas. And I may go very deep in this, not sure yet, we'll see. But the work that I am doing feels so right and so beautiful, and I am deeply blessed by how taken care of this mission really is. Even though we've gone so intimate and narrow at this point, my business continues to grow, and honestly, it's like angels and guides, my angels and guides, and God just continuing to magnetize those that are seeking what I have to offer to my light. And our lights are reuniting, and it feels like sacred reciprocity. And I'm just so incredibly grateful for that. You know, to the degree that we can meet ourselves and wake up to ourselves honestly and courageously is to the degree that we can meet anyone else, much less a guide who might be helping us in business or in health and wellness or in our finances or our relationships, all the ways, right, in which we have these roles that play out. And as spiritual guides, especially like myself, where it can kind of be a little bit of all over, the place. And I love that. But yeah, so we want to make sure that we are reaching out to those that have that capacity, especially in these times. It feels fairly essential. And so with that said, I'd also like to let you know that I am offering, I've got a couple of spots open for private mentorship. And so if that calls to you, you can by all means, go to my website and check it out. And I'll leave that link in a moment. But I also offer up the free Women's Wisdom Circle every Thursday on Zoom. That might be a good place to start and come check it out. We just work off of, a different living, like transmission and soul prompt every week. Whether it's a short podcast, a song, a gene key pulse, whatever it might be. And it's been beautiful in there, really deep and rich. I also, of course, have my retreats twice a year. I think the Soul Essence retreat is completely sold out, but maybe one seat. So if this speaks to you, I'm going to put my website link in a moment. And then another way to work with me, if you want to just get in and get clarity right now and some relief from something that's got you in the moment, then I offer up 2-hour, deeply immersive one-on-one soul sessions. And then you get access to me for the next week for integration via WhatsApp, basically, 24/7. So there's a lot of different ways that I feel very called to serve, and it's been working beautifully, and it's been highly effective. These times, as hard as they can be, they haven't felt as hard. They're just honest, just to have someone to, yeah, just to hold space. And of course, I've got my team that's holding space for me. And isn't the way that must go. That's what I believe New Earth is really all about. And it's a collaboration on so many levels. So here's to the journey, my loves. Thank you for tuning in. Oh, the website, michelle-sorro.com. So Michelle-sorro.com. And I believe I'll be putting something else together in the next couple of months as well. But that's quite a lot of different offerings and services if you feel called. But mainly, I wanted to say happy anniversary to us and thank you for listening. And I hope this served you. And if it did resonate for you in any way and you have a moment, I would love to hear from you through a review or simply reaching out wherever you might find me on all of the different platforms. All right, lots of love. And I wish you a beautiful, blessed rest of your day.